Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Broker Collective podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Malone, president of HRO Resources and the Broker Collective. Excited about this conversation today. I think so timely. Again, our audience here being insurance brokers, you guys all very well know, challenging time of the year, right? I know you guys are all out there trying to push through and finish strong, and that carries its own set of challenges. And then you have the market in the state that it's in, being a hard market, creating I think a lot of additional stress and a challenging environment to succeed in when you pair that with inflation and some of the other things that business owners are feeling. So I thought, a great time to really bring on Logan Skees, and I'll let Logan introduce himself in just a second, but excited to have Logan because Logan, I think kind of the pinnacle of toughness, right? When you think about the Marine Corps, Logan's a Marine Corps veteran, now a business leader. And so, really want to have a conversation, and hear from Logan some of his perspective and thoughts around mental toughness and mindset, and just what it takes to really dig deep in, circumstances like this. And regardless of what's going on around you, find a way to succeed and excel and continue to elevate. So Logan, great to have you, man. How you doing?
Great to be here, Marcus. Thanks for bringing me on the show today.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time. And happy early Veterans Day too. We're about 2 days away from Veterans Day. So, happy Veterans Day, man. We absolutely appreciate your service, and, just tremendously grateful for what what you've sacrificed for our great country. And yeah, man, excited for you to be able to share some of your wisdom and expertise today. Maybe kind of kick us off with a little bit of a brief introduction to yourself and your background.
Sure. Thanks for that, Marcus. We're also running up on the Marine Corps birthday as well. So this time of year, there's a lot to celebrate for the community. A quick background about myself. After high school, I enlisted in the Marine Infantry. I did 2 deployments to Afghanistan that looked like foot patrols in Southern Helmand Province, carrying a squad automatic weapon, a SAW, machine gun. On my second deployment, I was carrying a lot lighter weapon system, an M4, which is a sort of a condensed M16 type of thing, a lot lighter, which is nice when you're doing the all day foot patrols. We did a lot of helo raids out of Leatherneck on that second deployment. So that was my direct experience. I ended up getting out as a corporal, had experience running a squad of Marines after my second deployment. From there, was in the fitness industry for many years, and that culminated in a co-founding an investor-backed gym in South Florida called Trainer Space that was eventually sold to a big supplement company called Redcon One. Through that time, I've been through a number of veteran entrepreneur boot camps, the National Science Foundation's Innovation Core training for evidence-based entrepreneurship, and a year-long startup incubation program at Florida Atlantic University called Tech Runway. I've been involved with spearheading the formation and funding of a veteran service organization nonprofit called Gray Team, which has a facility in Boca Raton, and doing work with the National Guard in Florida as well. These days, I serve as a fractional integrator for business owners and part-time COO type of role, helping to bring clarity, organization, and momentum to key initiatives.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate it. And I knew some of that backstory, but not all of it, but that's pretty amazing. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, again, I think this kind of confirmation that, we've got, a great person on with us today to really kind of help guide us through and give some great insight into how to really kind of overcome adversity. And really, when I think about adversity and, toughness, I mean, to me, I feel like the Marine Corps is kind of the pinnacle of that, right? And so, your time in the Marine Corps, I mean, do you feel like the lessons that you learned in the Marine Corps and those experiences have kind of helped propel you or accelerate your success, as a business leader?
Marcus, something that I think is a trait developed in Marines, specifically infantry Marines, is grit. And Right before we hit the red button earlier, we were talking about the mindset of when a lot of the environment is giving negative signals, when there's difficulty and sustained difficulty. It's not just one hard day or a hard week, it's months of hard times.
Yeah.
Something that I've fallen back on in my life many times that I had learned in the Marines was that you can't stop time. No matter how bad things are, time is going to continue to tick on. And there's never been such a thing as a permanent bad time. If there's been long durations of bad times, but no such thing as a permanent bad time. So there's always going to be another season. That's how nature works. That's how reality works. There's always a seasonality to life. So we may be in a recession, at early points of a depression. There may be skyrocketing interest rates and a lot of friction in the marketplace to get and we're having difficulty with retention and new sales. But ultimately, if you detach and try to look at it from the macro or stratosphere point of view across a larger swath of time, this is a season that will change. So falling back on that one piece has been reassuring to me over the years.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I absolutely agree. I mean, no, these seasons aren't permanent, right? I mean, you once you kind of, you get on into your career some ways, it's easier to look back and see that, I've been in this space now for 17 years. And so I can look back and, there's been some really great seasons and some really tough seasons. Those are opportunities, I think, for us to really grow and learn in those moments. I think that's the important thing, and not just kind of like you see so many people, salespeople, I'm speaking to specifically just having worked around so many of them, but, or business owners, right? You come into these seasons that are challenging and you have a hard insurance market, you've got inflation, you've got all these things. And so many people are just like, you know what? We're not changing anything. We're just going to sit tight, recognizing this is a season. And, we're going to hunker down and weather that storm until that season's over. And a lot of folks do that. And a lot of those folks, that take that approach and mindset don't make it. A lot of them do. They survive and they come out of that season and, enter the next season where things are more prosperous. But, I like to really, what I've learned is just the opportunity that's in those moments of adversity and struggle where, if you approach it the right way, you can really position yourself to not only just survive those seasons, but still maybe even thrive in those seasons, but certainly position yourself to where when you start to come out of that season, you're so much further ahead of the game, ahead of your competition, because you've been adapting and evolving and learning in those moments and making changes to, position yourself for much higher and greater success, in that next season. For you, I mean, when you find yourself in those seasons, right, in those times where, like right now, hey, we've got inflation, you hear a lot of negativity all over the place about, what's going on economically or in the insurance space. I mean, what are some of the things that you're telling yourself, right? What's going through your mind, right? What are you thinking about? How are you keeping yourself, again, not just surviving, but, possibly thriving or certainly, in a positive state of mind? What are you telling yourself in those moments?
You mentioned adaptability a moment ago. I think that's really interesting to unpack further, Marcus. But I think one thing that should be said is the story or the myth of rising to the occasion when adversity comes is a myth. That is false. That doesn't happen. It happens in the books and in the stories. But when hard times come, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall back on our baseline. That's the principle to remember. Everyone knows about the fight or flight response. The reason why in the Marine Corps and in the military as a whole, we have such a obsessive emphasis on repetition and training and discipline is because when that adversity comes, when there's a surge of adrenaline and cortisol and rounds are snapping off overhead, we want to run towards the gunfire. We want to efficiently employ our weapon systems, right? We want to dominate in the battlefield. So to take that in parallel from the defense or military sector into the private sector, to translate that into industry, you think, although there may not be mortal stakes, lives may not be on the line, thank God, but livelihood is very close to that.
Yeah.
Keeping a roof over my family's head and food in their bellies, that's really high stakes in my mind. It may not be gunfire from the Taliban, but it's, keeping my family fed is pretty important. So that is adversity. That is enough to elicit a fight or flight response if you're facing that kind of strain daily, weekly, monthly for long durations. So my point is there's a parallel there, and we have to recognize part of the reality that we have as performers, as operators and leaders, even if you're just responsible for yourself and your own performance, not having direct reports. Responsibility and leadership are synonymous. They're the same exact thing, two sides of the coin. And the fact is, we never rise to the occasion. We fall back on our training. And something that I'm the first person to not want to appreciate this and not want to respect this, but the falling back on the training means practicing the fundamentals.
Yeah.
If inherent to falling back on training is this concept of performance and activity and showing up to get the work done in a difficult environment and an easy environment, whatever that would be, we're going to be executing on a plan, on a strategy in an operational environment. If you're exhausted and underfed and tightly wound because you don't have any sort of channel for mental health, you're falling back to a level that's far below where it should be, or could be at least. So showing up with the basics, and we're going to talk about adaptability and environment sensing and agile strategy and resilience. These things stack on top of the foundation. The foundation is boring. You've ever seen a construction site? You want to see the facade and the landscaping and the lighting, all the nice stuff. The foundation is boring, but without it, you're in trouble. What does the Bible talk about? Build your house on the rock. And that metaphor, that parable translates a million ways to Sunday. In this case, the foundation is showing up as a human being ready to perform, whether it be in the battle room, the boardroom, as cliche as that is, your work from home boardroom. You got to show up well rested, energized, and ready to move. So the foundations, the basics, you don't got to be a nutritionist or a trainer to know what those are. And that would be one thing I think is super important to emphasize, because that's the underpinning of activity. And I'll finish, Marcus, with a great mental image I learned a long time ago, that activity is like a bow and arrow. The farther back you pull the bow, the further out the arrow will go. And the same goes for activity and rest. The deeper you rest, the harder you chill, the further out you'll be able to go into activity. If you're trying to perform from a place of emptiness, then you're not going to make it very far. And that's where burnout comes into play. So despite the extreme signals you're getting from the environment that you have to ramp up your performance, you need to be very mindful and make that calculation on your status of rest and where you're drawing that energy from. Otherwise, you're playing.
No, that's amazing. And I think we talked a little bit about this in a previous conversation about kind of falling back, to your baseline. And I mean, that's so important, man. And part of it too is like when you think about people earlier on in their career, right? Some of this stuff is like we get stronger from learned experience. You go through some of these times and you learn, and the next time you enter one of these seasons, you handle it much better, right? Because you've been through it. And so for a young person, it's important to surround themselves with, mentors, training, support, invest in yourself, right? I mean, you can't always sit there and wait and lean on your employer to be the one to give you the preparation of the foundation that you need, right? I mean, obviously, hopefully that employer is doing their best job, or maybe employers you've worked for before, you picked up bits and pieces there, but don't hesitate to invest in yourself, right? Whether that be training or, things to support your mental health, whatever that may be. But, there's a lot you can do, I think, to and need to be doing to build that strong foundation, as early on as possible in your career. And that may look like, until you have some of that learned experience, maybe it's leaning on others, right? Talking to folks like myself, talking to folks like you, and your experience, and other business leaders who've maybe been through it, that can help you maybe avoid some of those pitfalls and be better prepared to deal with some of these adverse situations. And priorities, some of what you talked about makes me think about the importance of prioritization. When you enter these tough seasons, I mean, prioritizing is always, I think, critical, but, just understanding that it's natural to feel maybe additional stress and pressure when times get tough, but that much more important in those seasons to really, not let the added weight of 100 tasks weight you down even more, but really understanding the importance of prioritizing mental health, time for family, but also, what are the needle movers? Like, what are the top 3 things that I can be doing today that are going to move the needle, that are going to move me forward, push me closer to success? I'm going to focus more of my time and energy on those things, right? Which, kind of makes me think about, we talked a little bit about adaptability. That's something I wanted to talk about here on the show. Because for me, I mean, that's from my experience and some of the things that I've been through and what we've been through here with HRO. I mean, the pandemic was a good experience, a good example, where unexpected things happened, right? Times got tough. I mean, we went through something, I think, as a nation that we hadn't been through before, and businesses really felt that on a lot of different levels. And you saw a lot of companies not make it, right? A lot of companies fold up shop. And then you saw a lot of companies, us being one of them, come out of that like with the foot on the accelerator. I mean, really just kind of use that as a platform to regroup, to adapt and adjust, come out with a new strategy that has led us to record growth, in these kind of post-pandemic, past couple of years. So definitely curious to hear your thoughts on just the importance of being adaptable, when tough times hit, or you're in a tough market or challenging times. What are your thoughts on, being adaptable in order to continue elevating?
Earlier, you said, finding the needle movers, prioritizing the things that actually make a difference. If you only have a limited amount of time and energy, choosing the right things is critical, especially when it feels like there's millions of things to do and an unending stream of priorities flowing to you. This selection of priorities, and then the ability to focus on that priority long enough to move it forward is critical as well. Doing a little bit of a lot is not ideal. So I think there's something in the spirit of bringing military principles into this sector. I would say the acronym OODA, OODA, or the OODA loop is something helpful to remember in this scenario. And it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. Something I've said with teams a lot that brings this closer to home is not aligned with what the academics would discuss being part of a healthy corporate culture. So if you're listening, this may be a little bit of a trigger warning, and I'll put it as fairly as I can. But imagine if you're playing a video game, for example, and this video game just happens to be something to the effect of a zombie shooter. Which zombie are you going to shoot first? The ones closest to you. And the same goes for tasks. And I talk about this with my teams a lot. We've got a lot of priorities, but we have to take care of the ones that are closest to us, that are the most important. So whether you take that formal doctrine of observing the environment, orienting on the stated objectives of the organization, making a decision, and acting and executing that OODA loop, or you think of it in a little more of that gamified version, that's key, is making the decision. The other piece is we're bridging out of this concept of the fundamentals into like functional approaches to adapting in the environment, in the real world, is bookending units of time. This is something my team and I have worked a lot with our clients on and their teams, is this concept of standing up and standing down, whether it's a day, week, month, quarter, to have these formal stage gates, almost like a canal. You imagine a ship going through the Suez Canal. One gate has to close, one gate has to open, these locks. And the same way, you want to have that formal approach. To pull a parallel from military methodology, you think of a mission briefing and debriefing. We have this concept called the LOA, or the line of advance, or the limit of advance rather. And that's important in the space of preventing the burnout and maximizing performance for a given initiative. The limit of advance concept allows you to predetermine how far you'll go before breaking and consolidating. And oftentimes I've observed that a lot of professionals, whether they're individual contributors, they're solopreneurs, they're managers, so at every level of elevation in an organization, at almost any size organization, I've seen a commonality where they realize, where they're in this mindset, Marcus, of business is going on permanently. Simon Sinek talks about the infinite game. We want to be in business next week, next year, next decade. Ideally, we just continue playing the game, so to speak, and building and growing.
Yeah.
But without implementing milestones or stage gates or these limits of advance, whether it's, I just got to make it through to the end of today and do my best against these priorities, or week or month, and have these points where we pause and look back, that function is critical for adaptability. Because without that intentional moment of time where we're conducting an assessment on lessons learned, an after action review, it's really hard to know if we should adjust and recalibrate our actions. So I would frame that by bookending time being very critical, and predetermining what that looks like. So if it's at the end of every day, I'm going to spend 5 minutes just thinking, where was I effective? Where did I drift off? At the end of every week, say on Sunday night or a Monday morning, I said, I have to get these things done by the end of the week. And I missed 50% of them, or I missed 80% of them, right? And figuring out, why was that? Is my estimation off? Am I like really thinking I can get this much done, but I can only get this much done? Or was this possible, but I didn't do it because I got distracted? So learning those fundamentals of bookending time and having the self-awareness and team awareness to assess how the bandwidth is being implemented in reality is key in my view.
Oh, that's huge, and then that's a much more, I think, in-depth and strategic way of kind of really laying out something that I'm a big believer in. But I love how you said that. Something that I've personally done for probably a decade now, and coach a lot of folks on our team to do the same. But it's so easy to get in a routine where you're doing the same old things, on a day in a day out basis. And then all of a sudden you look back and realize, man, I've been in a rut for the last 3 months, or, we've fallen behind on our goals, and we're not really seeing success from some things. And maybe we're successful prior to, the current, but just having, like, on the calendar, a 30-day self-reflection, and it could be weekly, it could be daily, it could be whenever. But I encourage our sales team, for example, to, at least every 30 days, have a time to sit down, take an hour to yourself, and just really reflect on all the things that you're doing, right? The activity that you're putting in, the strategies that are at play, and what's yielding a good result and what's not. We don't want to go 6 months spending 50% of our time doing tasks and strategies that are not effective, right? And you see a lot of folks do that. I've watched a lot of salespeople fail, not because they're not putting in the effort, but they're not putting the effort in the right places, right? And they don't even recognize it, right? It's like, I'm doing this because this got me success the first, year or 2, 3, 5, whatever. But all of a sudden, things change drastically, and you have to recognize that, things change and shift, and you have to adapt to, the times, so to speak. And, I think I think back to, when I first started selling, HR payroll services at Disparity back in 2007, and I look to now. I mean, it's completely different, right? I mean, the way that we sell, the way that we engage with our prospects is completely different. I mean, things have just shifted so much. I mean, you still see a lot of folks that are still trying to prospect and, generate business the way that they did 15 years ago. And maybe they're having success, but they're having sporadic or limited success. But for me, I think one of the biggest blessings that I experienced was really kind of, coming here to HRO and smaller company, when I came over, and we've been so blessed and we've grown tremendously these last few years, but coming from managing a larger team to, kind of getting to a smaller field to where, in the beginning, those first few years, and even now, but especially the last few years, like being much more involved on the front lines of the sales process, right? And realizing that, man, if you're not really paying attention to, and engaged in the current environment, then, you may be one of those guys who are preaching and teaching on things that were successful 10 years ago that may not be that effective anymore. You might be burning through good talent because you're training people up. And I mean, I'm guilty of this, right? You're coaching, you're training, you're pushing principles that, that had helped you succeed 10, 12 years ago. And now those things aren't as successful, right? And so me getting kind of back into the front lines a little bit really opened my eyes and made me kind of, I guess, aware of, okay, some things are different now. So, how can we adapt and how can we, change our approach and dial things in to be successful today, right? Not what had me successful 5 years ago, but today. And so, it led us to a complete change of our business development strategy, in 2020 that has carried on to now, and record growth last year, again this year. I mean, it's continued, it's scalable, it's consistent, but it's that, adaptability and kind of awareness of really what's going on around you. But something I wanted to kind of maybe finish things on, I wanted to get your thoughts on. And, it's kind of the process I just explained that we've been through here at HRO, where, we went through this shift after the pandemic, and we come out of it with a completely different business development strategy. Our company looks entirely different, and it's been it's been the greatest thing. But it was anything but comfortable, right? It's not like we entered this process with a clear vision of exactly how this would play out. We had an end result in mind that we wanted to achieve, but the path to getting there and establishing the new process, the new game plan, I mean, that kind of took a little bit of molding and shaping and testing and trial and error. But something that I think is so important, and I want to hear your perspective, we all want to be comfortable, right? But I mean, I really feel like once you get comfortable, you stop growing, right? Growth it's uncomfortable. It requires you to do some things that are maybe a little bit outside of your comfort zone to really see significant, meaningful growth. And so understanding that it's okay if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable right now, you're a little bit stressed, you're maybe trying some new things with your business, and it's probably not going to be a comfortable process, right? I think it's important to understand that that's a part of the journey, right? That's where growth happens. You get out of your comfort zone, you push yourself, you put some new strategies and things at play, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but the longer you do it, the more, comfort will be established in that. But kind of what are your thoughts around that from kind of a, military background? Like, what are your thoughts around just that whole concept of really pushing through and breaking through barriers, understanding, it's going to take some discomfort to get there? A lot to unpack there.
Marcus, there's a wonderful book I highly recommend called Tools of High Performance Teams. And in that book, there's an academic analysis of elements of a healthy, high-performance corporate culture. One of them is something the academics call nonviolent communication. For example, these folks will take things to such an extent where they'll say, calling things bullet points, or saying something like, hey, I'll take a stab at that. is sort of off the list, and it is a breach of psychological safety. So knowing that, I know I can't claim ignorance, but the answer I have for you is going to completely destroy that healthy culture. So that'll be my second and last disclaimer for the call, for any trigger warnings for people that live in that camp. So take everything I'm about to say with a massive grain of salt. I'm only qualified to speak on my own personal experience. Is that fair?
Absolutely. That's what you're here for.
So to that end, I would say there's a philosophy from Stoicism that's memento mori, or remember you're mortal, that you will die. And coming to terms with that is really important, that life is finite. And then also realizing where you're at in the overall scheme of things, and seeing if you're in your prime, if you're like a part of the peak of the bell curve of the labor market, so to speak, you're like in the workforce and you've got several decades ahead of you, ideally, of just doing your best work in your life. And things are hard and it's uncomfortable. And you talked about pursuing, wanting to be comfortable. And that's oftentimes a direct output of being successful in business is more comforts. So that can't be denied. And I'm not David Goggins over here telling you to run 80 miles in the cold or something crazy like that. But there's like the piece of that's, I'm going to botch this statistic, Marcus, but there's that thing of like dudes who retire that have worked their entire lives. They only make it for a few years of playing golf and then they die. It's like, that's a real general, probably flawed statement. It doesn't reflect the actual data, but if you don't have a purpose, if you don't have a challenge, if you're not on a mission, like life becomes meaningless very quickly. And that's not to say work is the only type of mission or purpose you can have, of course,
Right.
But having that challenge is key. So something that I've said many times with team members over the years is the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fires. If you're going to show up to play the game, if you're going to show up in the arena, you don't want second place. Even low performers don't wake up and actively decide to do their least. Yeah, everyone is showing up and doing the best that they can. So all we can do is continue to improve upon our best and realize that the intensity of the environment and the adversity and obstacles we face are like being put into the furnace, into the forge to make us better for the next time. It's just like in the gym, your training, all of the training you've done up until now has brought you to the point where you can do what you can, but you push yourself a little bit past failure. And that way you can do more next week and the following week. So viewing it in that mechanism that even though you may fail, even though it's really difficult now, you're getting to build your capacity, your capabilities, and your skill set to continue improving, to pursue that purpose and that mission, to stay alive, to be harder to kill, and to provide for those that you care about. So that would be some of my thinking along those lines.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Absolutely. And I think it's so important too. Something that I was listening to yesterday, just kind of a fresh reminder of just really taking it day by day, right? Not getting overwhelmed by looking at, the massive mountain that might be in front of you, but really kind of enjoy, learn how to enjoy the journey. I mean, that's a process I'm practicing myself, right? I mean, these are not like one and done decisions. This is kind of like, concepts that you take and it becomes an active part of your daily routine. But just really trying to learn how to enjoy the journey, take it day by day, face one day at a time. Each day has its own challenges. You referenced the Bible earlier. I mean, each day has its own challenges. I mean, the Lord's Prayer talks about, give us this day our daily bread. I mean, the Lord gives us, manna, provision for each day, right? And so I think it's important to really just think about taking things one day at a time. And it's to continue to press forward, right? Like don't recluse and sit back and, be terrified of the challenge in front of you or the economy or what's going on in the news. Keep a positive mindset, keep pushing, keep trying new things, get out of your comfort zone. Great things never came from comfort zones. I think we've kind of all heard that, but it's so true. But man, Logan, I really appreciate your time today, your insights. I think you bring such a unique perspective, and having the background that you've had, and now success as a business leader. And before we go, just kind of real quick, want to give an opportunity for you to just, tell us a little bit about the business that you're running today. And where,
Sure.
and definitely let us know where, let everyone know where they can find you and follow along with your content as well.
Sure. If people want to learn more about the work that I do, and they can go to our website, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll drop that in the show notes below. The website is venturemap.ai. I've had the great fortune of serving a number of business owners over the years as a second in command. And that typically looks like a fractional COO or integrator, and will support the improved organization and streamlining of processes, establishment of systems, employee training, these sorts of things. These days, we have an emphasis on business terrain modeling. That's been an area of a lot of fun and a lot of exploit. I guess I'm a nerd in that regard, because I would call business architecture and service design fun. But that's my passion. That's what I love doing, and leveraging the emerging technologies in the generative AI space and smart automations to help businesses scale with maximum efficiency has been an area of a lot of focus of ours for a while. So building out knowledge bases that fuel all of that is a big piece to it. So that would be a little bit of what we do. It's a lot of what I love. And if they want to learn more, we've got all sorts of free resources we can share, and just either reach out to me on LinkedIn or check out our website, and we'll send them over to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Make sure to follow Logan on LinkedIn for sure. He's putting out a lot of great content. I enjoy keeping up with it. And as always, I'm your host, Marcus Malone. This is the Broker Collective podcast, and you can definitely find us and follow us. Keep up with us on YouTube. Make sure to check out the brokercollective.xyz. So www.brokercollective.xyz to learn more about what we're doing at the Broker Collective. Until next time, stay safe. Again, thanks, Logan.
Thank you.
Respect the heck out of all you veterans, and just very grateful for your insights today. And we will catch you all on the next episode. Thanks, everybody.